1 week season.
What is going on, OWS fam, DFS fam? Welcome to the DFS Lab, week 16. I am your host, JM to Win, here as always with my guest Keegan. Keegan, my man, how are you doing?
Doing great. I am ready to build this lineup, but not ready for this slate.
Yeah, Tuesday, as we open this up, obviously part of the goal of this show is to make the slate flexible for ourselves, talk some DFS theory, but also get a sense of what this slate provides. So I've done some preliminary looks at this slate. You know, typically Monday is my day off, and then like Monday night is when I kind of start looking at things. But last night, Abby and I watched Die Hard, and then I went to bed as soon as it ended. Actually, we didn't even finish it. And then the kids have been waking up at night lately. So I get to bed early last night, but took a little look at this slate yesterday afternoon. It's interesting, right? There's like, if it were no weather issues, no injuries, it would be an interesting slate. We'd have Josh Allen, we'd have Patrick Mahomes against Seattle, we'd have Jalen Hurts, we'd have Justin Fields, we'd have Lamar Jackson. But on this slate, it looks like the Bills are going to have a hard time. I don't know if you've seen this, but the Bills are going to have a hard time even getting to Chicago. There's supposed to be a blizzard on Friday, so they're probably going to have to fly in early, and then the game's going to be played in horrible conditions. Kansas City, it's supposed to be -6 degrees, I think, at kickoff. Jalen Hurts obviously expected to miss. Justin Fields playing against Buffalo in that same game. Joe Burrow playing against the tough New England defense, although I'm not super scared of that matchup. Kirk Cousins in a game that the Vikings should control. Deshaun Watson, although the Browns have been trying to hide him so far, but he's playing New Orleans. He's only 6K. I think that's a very interesting spot. There are a few other interesting spots. Jared Goff on the road at Carolina. But yeah, it's definitely interesting. And then the running back position, there's actually a lot more to like this week than we normally get. Christian McCaffrey's on the slate. Derrick Henry's playing Houston. Saquon's in a good matchup against Minnesota. Dalvin Cook's in a solid spot against the Giants. Ramondre Stevenson looks like he's back to the full-time role. Or at least should be this week. Alvin Kamara saw like 23 touches last week. He's playing a really bad run defense in Cleveland this week. Kenneth Walker's back this week playing against a bad run defense in Kansas City. So a lot to like at the running back position. I think it's going to be an interesting week. And I think also this slate's on Christmas Eve, right? So I think a lot of people probably won't have the same level of dedication and focus to this slate. So with all that, Keegan, we are going to build a roster we're going to say typical like 10,000 entry tournament, whether that is MME or single entry doesn't really matter to us because we're going to build several rosters and put them in across different places as if we are MME players playing in the single entry contest. So with that in mind, any thoughts on where you want to start on this roster this week?
I got a few places we could go down and grab Jared Goff.
Okay, I like that. And I like too, I don't know how this will develop throughout the week, but the narrative around him has been that he's not as good on the road. It makes sense, right? Playing in a dome at home. But you and I have also talked about that a lot of his home numbers, like 4 of his home games, were DJ Shark and Amon-Ra St. Brown both healthy. They also have Jameson Williams mixing in now. They've got DeAndre Swift is healthy. DeAndre Swift is really underpriced this week, probably going to be popular. And because he's going to be popular, but then there's also a lot of solid running back options available, kind of makes going to Goff a way to be a little bit different, maybe take points away from the DeAndre Swift rosters or even pair DeAndre Swift on here. So, I like Goff a lot this week. And I got some money down on the Lions over 23.5 points. I got a bet down this last week, Lions to win the Super Bowl at like plus 10,000. So it's like $50 makes like $5,000 if they win the Super Bowl this year. That's obviously changed dramatically after this last weekend with them beating another playoff opponent in the Jets and Seattle losing, and then obviously Washington Giants played each other. So, I really like this Lions offense and like this spot for them against Carolina.
Okay. And then there's one more quarterback I was kind of looking at. We could do Brock Purdy if you want to get risky.
So my thoughts on, I guess it's really interesting. You know what? In a tournament, my thoughts on Purdy are they're not going to want to throw the ball a lot, right? But Washington has a good run defense. We've seen Purdy, he put up 15.3 on, 37 pass attempts, but that's what they don't want him to do. He put up 21.7 on 21 pass attempts. He put up 16.5 on 26 pass attempts. I think his ceiling is pretty capped in a game against Washington because what are the chances that Washington forces the 49ers to throw the ball more than 26, 27 times, right? So like the chances of Purdy putting up 35 points are extraordinarily low.
Right.
But if it's a slate where, you only need 25 points from one of these guys, I think he could certainly get there.
Okay, cool. So let's do Jared Goff then.
It's interesting that you've got ads on your DraftKings.
Do I?
Yeah, when you open up the players, there's ads there, which I've never seen on mine.
I didn't notice that.
I don't know what that's all about. Maybe it's my ad blocker just blocks them, or maybe it's
Dude, I don't even have an ad blocker, so
because you don't use your computer for anything because you're in your early 20s and people your age don't use computers apparently. All right, so if we're going Goff, what's the next thought here as far as how you want to build this roster? I think there's probably a few ways we could go. We could obviously go Amon-Ra St. Brown. Right. We could go 2 wide receivers. We could go Amon-Ra St. Brown and DeAndre Swift. We could go Amon-Ra St. Brown solo and move on to another spot. We don't need a bring back here, but we could have a bring back. There's definitely a lot that we could do from this point.
Okay. Well, I feel like the Lions defense has been better the past, I think, 3 weeks?
Yeah, more like, I think like 5 weeks. I played him a decent amount this last weekend.
So we don't even need to bring back, like you said, necessarily, especially against the Steelers. So
yep.
I think I'm just going to pick St. Brown. And then if you want, we could go with like a double wide receiver with Chark in there as well.
So what I would probably do if we're not doing the bring back, I'd probably go Swift if I'm doing a second player from the Lions. Like I wouldn't necessarily do a second player, but it would basically be saying the chances of like Goff plus Amon-Ra St. Brown plus Chark hitting in a game where nobody from the Panthers is hitting is a little bit lower than a running back where he can be involved, on the ground and through the air. So I'd be fine without Swift. I'd also be fine throwing in Swift, but he would be if I'm not going to bring back, if I were building a bunch of these Goff rosters, I'd have some that would be Goff, Chark, St. Brown. But starting out without a bring back, my early ones would probably go Swift or just Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Awesome. Okay, and then we can go defense if you'd like.
All right, let's see defense this week. Interestingly, if we scroll down to the bottom, the very, very bottom, if we're concerned about weather in Chicago's down here at 2K and just opens up an extraordinary amount. I'm not as concerned about cold weather in Kansas City. If we end up getting some snow or like heavy snow, then I might think about that. But I would be interested in the Bears. I'd be interested, if we're talking like, hey, let's start down on the cheaper defenses and maybe as we get deeper into the week on some of these shows, we'll push ourselves to be like, hey, who are the more expensive defenses that we want to go to and maybe differentiate. But I think that the Bears are interesting if we want to just save salary. The Eagles, I'm not that scared of the Cowboys offense. The Eagles' really good defense is also interesting at 2,200. But either of those is the way to go. Or if you're seeing another one kind of down at this lower end, we can go a different direction as well.
Man, I've looked at everything but the defenses this week, and so
I think the Cowboys are going to be somewhat popular going against Gardner Minshew, but I really think that the Eagles are just, they have so many weapons. It's like, let's look at what the 49ers have done with Brock Purdy, right? Like you can put Minshew in there. Minshew's not a bad quarterback. He can just distribute the ball to these incredible weapons that the Eagles have. So Cowboys defense at 2,600, I think is also interesting, but not one that it's one that I think will be somewhat popular. And so I'm fine going a different direction there as well. If we want to go a little more expensive, the Chiefs are playing Seattle. Seattle will be missing Tyler Lockett. Geno definitely takes some sacks, is prone to some turnover. So that's a spot that we consider at only 2,900.
I think let's just have fun with this and let's go with the Bears.
Let's go with the Bears. We're gonna have maximum salary. What I love about it too is we spend 7,800 on Amon-Ra St. Brown, but because we paired him with these kind of lower cost quarterback, lower cost running back, cheapest defense, we still have a ton of flexibility here in terms of salary. I'm assuming your next spot that you're looking at is swinging over to the tight end position.
Yeah.
So tight end is interesting. We're getting, I guess, slightly higher prices on Chigo Okonkwo, on Juwan Johnson. I would think Noah Fant becomes more involved this week with Lockett out, but also Will Dissly is also typically involved as a tight end for the Seahawks. They go a lot more 2 tight end sets. They'll probably start out trying to run the ball just to try to keep the game under control, but eventually they're going to have to pass against Kansas City. And then we've got Mark Andrews is only 5,500, which at this point seems criminal, right? He hasn't done anything in a while, but Looks like Lamar Jackson will be back this week playing against Atlanta, really bad pass defense. We know that they'll bias toward the run, but Andrews should still see 7, 8, 9 targets. So I think Andrews at 5,500 is interesting. I think that Dallas Goedert coming back this week is interesting. He had a big game last year with Minshew. I think it was 6 catches for 105 yards, something like that. And then, obviously these cheaper tight ends, Chigo Okonkwo, Noah Fant, those guys are interesting as well. I guess my question to you would be, do we think that we save enough in salary going to like these 3,500 guys who can probably get 8 to 12 points when we could spend 1K more to get to Goddard or 2K more to get to Mark Andrews and just have a much higher ceiling, right? It's like if Goddard and Andrews kind of disappoint, it's nice to save that salary. But if one of them puts up 25 points, we're really burying ourselves by going to these cheaper guys. So that's kind of the question I would be asking here. I don't know that there's a right answer, especially at this point in the week, but that's the way I'd want to look at it. You have any thoughts on that?
I love that idea about, it's only 1,000 more to go up and have a lot more guaranteed points, or I guess like a higher floor.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of feeling that this week. I really don't like anyone except for maybe Kelsey and Andrews in the tight end position this week. Because, I don't like playing people against the Dallas defense. But, again, that's like a bias that I have, and we talked about that.
Yeah, and that hurt me last week. I wasn't on Zay Jones at all last week, and I've been on him multiple times. I was on him on his last 30-pointer and he was part of a really big weekend for me. And Mike Johnson wrote up that game in the NFL Edge and was writing it up as like a potential shootout. And he was like, the Cowboys defense is dealing with these injuries, and like there's more to be concerned about with the Cowboys defense. Trevor Lawrence had been like the number 2 quarterback on Pro Football Focus over the last 3 or 4 weeks heading into this last week's game. And I still just kind of wrote it off and just avoided that game as a whole, which obviously that was kind of the game that you had to have. So I'm fine not playing Goddard, right? I think that with Minshew, they're going to try to control this game. They're going to try to keep the ball on the ground probably a little bit more. Goddard, all these games with Jalen Hurts where he's got, let's see, from the start of the season, 9 points, 13, 11, 12, 17, 4, 12, a 27-pointer in there and then 10. But mostly he's in this like 11 to 12-point range, 17 occasionally. That's like Chigo Okonkwo type scores, right? So yeah, I don't think that we're necessarily like hurting ourselves not taking Goddard against the Dallas defense. I think he's super viable, but I would be fine. Like Andrews hasn't been drawing ownership, right? And he had 6 points last week, 3 the week before, 9 the week before, 11, 12, 6. But right before that, it was 26 points, 22 points, 3, 28, 28. So we know he's still capable of that type of score. So I'd be fine going Mark Andrews or just saying, hey, you know what? If we're not going all the way up to Andrews or Kelsey, then let's go down lower. I'll also say if I'm going Kelsey, I probably want to complete that bet with DK Metcalf or Kenneth Walker, right? Like I want to say Seattle keeps this game close if I'm playing Kelsey, because otherwise it's tough. Kelsey's up to 8K. It's tough for him to put up a 30-pointer without Seattle keeping this game somewhat close. So yeah, I'm fine with Kelsey, but then I think with Kelsey, we box up a lot of salary, which is not a bad thing. It's just like, that's the bet that we'd want to make to really complete the bet, is add DK Metcalf or Kenneth Walker to this roster. So yeah, with all that in mind, obviously we typically go to tight end here to like see what our salary looks like. So we're kind of making a key decision here for the rest of the roster. We can always pivot down if we go more expensive here, but what are you thinking? Do you want to start with a cheaper guy, or you want to start with one of these more mid-tier guys, or go all the way up to Kelsey?
I'm kind of feeling we start with a cheaper guy and then just get a little like base of what our salary is going to be.
On Tuesday, do you have a cheaper guy you like? I think Fant is definitely interesting if we're talking about that game environment. He had 14 points last week. He had 14 points in week 13. He had 14 points in week 9. Again, no Lockett, so he's going to be a little bit more involved here. Or again, Chigo Okonkwo just has this big role right now, assuming Treylon Burks is out again against Houston, although probably Tennessee keeps the ball on the ground a lot more in that spot.
Okay. Let's go with Fant then. I was going to go with Okonkwo, but if you think that they're going to keep the ball on the ground, let's go with Fant.
Yeah, and I'm going to real quickly just to look at that and I guess to demystify it a little bit, as I call it, right? Turning into raw numbers. Last week, Ryan Tannehill, 22 pass attempts. Week 13, 22 pass attempts. Week 11, 27 pass attempts. Week 7, a game that they won 19-10, 20 pass attempts. Week 4, a game that they won 24-17, 21 pass attempts. Like they would love to do that if they can, right? If they're playing Houston this week. They have Derrick Henry. Like half of Derrick Henry's monster games over the last 5 years have come against Houston. So it's certainly a spot where they would prefer to just run the ball if they can, which could, Chig could still have a good game, but his chances of having like an 8 or 9 target game are way lower. Whereas the Seattle offense, they're going to have to pass at some point against Kansas City. And then that's just going to mean more opportunities for targets for Fant. So I could see Fant having like a legitimate 8-9 target game in this spot.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because, Derrick Henry is Derrick Henry.
Yeah, and it's one of the things too that with this show, again, like I said last week, right now we're probably mostly reaching OWS members, but as we're reaching more people, like if you're watching this and you're kind of newer to this type of thinking, the more we think about game environments, the better off we're going to be, because a lot of times the field just thinks about players. Oh, I like this player or I like this matchup, but how does that game actually play out makes a big difference in how much upside we actually have access to. And so, man, I mean, honestly, right now, right, if we talk about just points that we can get, Goff plus Swift plus Amon-Ra St. Brown, that can be 75 combined points. I mean, it can be 90 to 100, but probably not in this game environment. If we give them 75 to 80 points, if we give Noah Fant 15 points, if we give the Bears defense 10 points, I mean, we're sitting on a lot of points already, and we still have like 6,400 in salary left per position here. So I really like where we're at right now. Probably a good potential for us to fit in a couple different high-priced guys, which I guess that kind of becomes the next question to me is like, are there some high-priced guys that we want to prioritize? I would imagine Derrick Henry will be massively popular this week against Houston. He's always popular against Houston, but we also have Christian McCaffrey. We have, like I said, some other good running backs up there. And then we've got Justin Jefferson on this slate in a winnable matchup against the Giants. We have probably Stephon Diggs is off of our board here against the Bears defense in that bad weather game. We already have Amon-Ra St. Brown as one of the higher priced wide receivers. So yeah, DK Metcalf, I think as an alpha here, we could pair him with Noah Fant and just say like, we're not necessarily betting on this offense having a huge game. We're just betting on this being a concentrated offense. But yeah, a lot of different places we can go at the higher ends of the price range, but we kind of are getting to a point where we're needing to make that decision. So anybody up here who you want to maybe isolate on this particular build?
Yeah, I like DK, like you were saying, and I also like Kamara as well.
Oh, I like that. I think Kamara could get like a little bit buried after disappointing last week. Yeah. But like we said, it was 21 carries, 2 receptions. And one of the things that chased me off of him last week on my tighter build, like all my 3 max and my single entry, I don't think I had any Kamara. And it was the fact that across his last 8 games against Atlanta, he hadn't topped 22 DraftKings points. And that went through like some of his big seasons, right? It's just a defense that's in his division, knows how to play against him. And then he was going to be 33% owned. And it's like, I'll take my chances on a 30% owned guy against a team that has shut him down for 4 consecutive years. But now he's playing Cleveland, really bad run defense as well. And we just saw him get 23 touches. Not quite the must-win game that they had last week, but they still have a shot at making the playoffs in this horrible NFC South with that win last week. And so, I could see them riding Kamara kind of heavily in this spot. Gets us off of Derrick Henry, or maybe we end up with Derrick Henry in the flex, but it gets us going a different direction than the field is going to be going here.
All right, let's do it. Just making sure that I'm in. Okay, yeah, I was in flex.
So actually, you know what's interesting too? If we end up going Kamara and DK Metcalf, we might have enough salary left to fit Derrick Henry as well, or to fit in like. So let's see. With Derrick Henry, we're going to spend. Is
there anybody low we can grab?
Yeah, DK Metcalf. We're going to be able to do it. We would have 4K in salary left. If we throw in DK Metcalf, we'll be able to throw in a 4K wide receiver. I think Metcalf is 7,100. And then Henry is 86. He's not 8K this week, but we'll have 3,400 left for. Yeah. So let's throw in Henry just because I think. One of the things that I want to think about here, and then we'll see if there's any pieces down here that we can actually justify playing at 3,400 or below. But one of the things I like to think about here is like, do we want to not just who do we like on the slate, right? But what's our path to first place? And if Henry's like 40% owned, we're kind of placing a bet that he's not going to hit in this spot. And then it's like, what's his bad game against Houston? Probably still 25 points, right? And so it's one of those spots where I tend to unless there's like clear differentiation or guys who can clearly soar past him in scoring, I like to just say, okay, here's a spot where I'll just ride up the field with the chalk. And then if I'm wrong, like on this roster, I'm wrong. It is what it is, but I don't really get hurt that much because so many people have this guy. But if Henry hits, like this isn't the spot where I want to outsmart the field is how I try to think of things. So like when I get deeper into the week, there's certain points where I'm making decisions. Like last week I played Chris Moore and I didn't like Chris Moore as much as the field liked him, but it was a spot where it was like, and obviously I had a lot of roster, but I played a lot of Chris Moore is what I mean. And it was like, is this the spot where I want to try to differentiate, right? Or is this the spot where I want to just say, let me just stick with the field on this one and be different in other spots? And then I kind of see Henry like that, where on this roster, I don't think that a lot of people are going to have like a Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, DeAndre Swift, like full stack. I don't think a lot of people are going to have Noah Fant and DK Metcalf paired without a Kansas City bring back, which is actually a really sharp way to go because Kansas City spreads the ball around to so many guys, but Seattle's going to be super concentrated and they're going to be chasing points. So we can easily get 40 plus points from Metcalf and Fant combined at 10.5K in salary without needing Kansas City piece. But we have like a really unique build here. Ton of upside on this build. Swift can score 30, Kamara can score 30, Amon-Ra St. Brown can score 30, Metcalf can score 30, Henry can score 30. And then, yeah, it's just down to like, what can we get at 3,400 at wide receiver? Are you seeing anything down here?
Not really. I mean, I guess we got Khalif Raymond.
I wish we had 100 more in salary. Rashid Shaheed
I was looking
is
at that too.
3,500. But there's like literally nowhere on this roster that we could pivot down. Amari Rogers, let's see. He only had 2 catches this last week, but he should. I mean, we don't know yet about the injuries here to this wide receiver core, but he still could have a role this week. Olamide Zaccheaus is kind of one of these guys who doesn't have a consistent like floor, but he has a 14-pointer, he has an 11-pointer, he has a 10-pointer. Nelson Aguilar, same thing, right? People played him last week, even though Jacoby Myers ended up being active. But with Jacoby Myers, he has an 18-pointer, he has a 26-pointer on the year. Laviska Shenault can hit for big plays. Yeah, it's definitely thin down here, but we could basically say one of these guys can hit, or we could pivot down from, I think, Noah Fant, or if we pivot down at running back, like from DeAndre Swift, would be the clearest way to like break up the bets that we already have and then target a little bit more upside down at the bottom. So I wouldn't be against the idea of moving Henry into the running back spot, taking out DeAndre Swift, and seeing what sort of flexibility we have with 2 spots left and a little bit more salary to work with.
Okay. And so what makes you want to get rid of DeAndre Swift over Alvin Kamara?
Well, no, and I'd be totally fine with Kamara too, but it's like just trying to think through the bets that we're placing, right? And what maximizes our ceiling here. The Goff and Swift and Amon-Ra St. Brown stack without a bring back is to me more of a floor bet than a ceiling bet, because we know Carolina's a super concentrated offense. If Carolina's doing anything, we know who the ball's going to. And so the fact that we're not doing a bring back means we're saying that Carolina doesn't get anything going. So we're saying the Lions just sort of stomp on Carolina. And so we're not necessarily getting like a monster game where because these guys can combine for 100 points. Like Amon-Ra St. Brown could have 40 and Swift could have 30 in the same game if it's a shootout, like a 45-48 game or something like that. But we're basically betting against it being a shootout. And so we're kind of taking these guys as like a floor bet of guaranteed points as opposed to a ceiling bet. So I'd rather take on a little more risk in order to take on a little bit more ceiling. And then if this were like a small field tournament, like 300 entries or something, then I would probably be likelier to move down from Kamara and keep Swift and kind of keep that block of guaranteed points. But if we're talking like trying to beat 10,000 people for first place, I'd rather break up the floor bet than the ceiling bet is sort of the thinking there.
Awesome. That makes a lot of sense.
So this gives us a lot more flexibility now. We still have the flex available to us for the running back position, but I think once we get below Swift, we're in like a totally different range of potential scores. So I don't think it's going to be running back that we go to, but what we could do is we kind of look at, we know that we got to go 5,400 or below at wide receiver because the guy we liked the most there was Shaheed. at 3,500. So if we go, honestly, if we start here, oh man, there's a couple guys who I really like here. Darius Slayton finally had a disappointing game this last week, but 15 points in week 13, 13 points in week 11, 18 points in week 10, only one touchdown in there. You know, he's getting 70 plus yards most of these games. Donovan Peoples-Jones, like, I think people are sleeping on the potential of this Browns offense, right? He had 13 points last week. He had 22 points the week before. He had 13 points the week before. All of those with Deshaun Watson. People were drafting him in best ball for the end of the season when Deshaun Watson would be back. I mean, Donovan Peoples-Jones has a downfield role against New Orleans, plays a lot of man coverage. Gabe Davis, again, we're on the weather in that game, so probably not on this roster. Jacoby Myers disappointed last week, so people will be off of him. Drake London against a team that the Ravens forced like the second highest opponent pass play rate. So even though we know Atlanta wants to keep the ball on the ground, they're going to be forced to pass the ball eventually. In this one, Drake London had double-digit targets each of the last two games, 11 targets and 12 targets. So I think any of those guys are super interesting. Is there anybody from that pool of receivers who you like more than the others?
Well, I mean, I kind of thought a double tight end, but I don't think that works. I was going to do Mark Andrews and Noah Fant.
Ooh, but Mark Andrews he's 55, right? So we're back in that same exact DeAndre Swift. Because also DJ Moore would have paired nicely with our Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's 5,500. We're like boxed in on this like this 100 extra that we need in salary here. Yeah, I would have been up for the double tight end on this one, but it looks like we got to go below that price point.
Well, in that case, I do like Peoples. I do like Donovan Peoples-Jones. Like,
yeah, and the thing about Donovan Peoples-Jones, and I'll say the same thing about Drake London. Technically, Darius Slayton's the same way. Back in like 2019, he had, I think it was 3 30-point games, and then he just got buried on the bench in this offense. But specifically, Donovan Peoples-Jones and Drake London, these guys can score 30 points, right? Drake London hasn't done it yet. Donovan Peoples-Jones actually hasn't done it yet, but last year he put up 20 and his role was a lot smaller. This year he keeps having these big games where he's really close. So the fact that these guys are in this 5K range and can score 30, I like that a lot. And then we're just going to have like one piece on this roster that's kind of like, hey, let's open up salary here. And it's maybe not our core piece, but like, again, we'll go through this roster and see 30 pointers across the board on this roster. And honestly, man, you know what else is cool here is we're taking DeAndre Swift off, but replacing him with Donovan Peoples-Jones. And it's like range of outcomes, what's like, who's likelier to outscore the other? We really don't know. It's kind of a coin flip, you know, end of the day, Donovan Peoples-Jones is just as likely to outscore DeAndre Swift as the other way around. So, yeah, I like this pivot right here. What do we have? 3,800 in salary left over?
Yep.
All right. So 3,800. Jahan Dotson is 3,900. I love Dotson. Jameson Williams, probably not seeing enough snaps yet for us to go there. Man, if DeVante Parker comes back, do you realize DeVante Parker, week 3, 23 points, week 4, 10 points, week 6, 10 points, week 7, 9.8, week 12, 12 points. I mean, we're down here on these like 3K guys where a lot of them, if they get 10 points, you're lucky. DeVante Parker is actually really interesting. The Cincinnati defense missing Mike Hilton last week, missing Awuzie. And last week we saw Mike Evans, very similar style player, put up a really nice game against Cincinnati. The week before, who was it? Somebody else put up a nice game against Cincinnati, who was it was Donovan Peoples-Jones, similar, like this perimeter downfield type guy. So DeVante Parker's a guy I really like here. Or we could go Terrace Marshall, who's opposite our bet on the Lions. If Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown are putting up a lot of points, then the Panthers are forced to pass the ball a bit more. Terrace Marshall could get involved. I don't think we can go wrong with either of those calls. Or we can go back where we originally were and go to Shaheed at 3,500.
Okay. You know, I really like Shaheed a lot. But I mean, like you said, you really can't go wrong with either of these picks.
Yeah, and with Shaheed, we already have Kamara too, which doesn't necessarily break things for us, right? Like Shaheed hit last week and Kamara got 23 touches, so he could have hit as well. But we already have the double up bet with DK Metcalf and Noah Fant. I wouldn't mind like kind of spreading out our risk a little bit and taking on a little bit more upside by going to one of these guys. And again, you could build what you would probably do in this spot is like build all 3 of these rosters if you like these first 8 spots, and then just be like, we've got one with DeVante Parker, and we've got one with who was it? One with Terrace Marshall and one with Shaheed. And then you've got, all three of these in play. But I would be fine with whichever direction we want to go here.
Let's do Parker.
I like it. I like the ceiling that we're targeting here. And we can go through, like, let's say Goff to Amon-Ra St. Brown. Let's say that's 55 points, right? We don't need the game environment to get crazy for that to be 55. Let's give Derrick Henry 35. We're up to 90. Let's give Kamara 25, which isn't a crazy score for him. We're up to 115. Let's give DK Metcalf and Noah Fant 45. That puts us up to 160. Donovan Peoples-Jones and DeVante Parker can each score 20. Honestly, they can each score 25, but that gets us up over 200. And then the Bears defense, whatever they get for us in the snow against a mistake-prone quarterback, or not mistake-prone, but mistake-embracing quarterback, a risk-taking quarterback in Josh Allen in the snow, in a potential blizzard. Whatever points they get are kind of bonus on top of that. We get up to 215 points on this roster. And we didn't get, those weren't crazy 90th percentile scores. We gave Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown 55. We gave Kamara 25. Metcalf and Fant could go for more than 45. So, I mean, this roster has a ton of upside, makes pretty clear and obvious bets, but it's going to be put together differently than everybody else, right? Like, who else is fitting in? Amon-Ra St. Brown, DK Metcalf, Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, all on a roster together and still packing in upside at the other spot. So, right. Really like what we did here. Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, I really like the Metcalf Fant double play here. I could play that on a lot of different rosters. So
and a lot of people don't do these concentrated double pairings, and we've talked about it this year on the Winner Circle podcast, which is kind of our Tuesday podcast where we talk more about strategy than about like the individual slate. And we broke down one of Osimo's rosters this year that had like 5 Miami pieces and no bring back, and it was like, the thought was, and he had another big weekend this year where he had Derek Carr, Josh Jacobs, Devontae Adams, and I think like Mac Hollins or something like that. The thought is these concentrated offenses where you just know where all the targets are going or where all the touches are going becomes so valuable, especially deeper into the season with tight pricing. And in this spot, that Kansas City is going to score points. So that the Seahawks are going to be passing the ball. And so you're just getting a ton of targets it's like when you used to pay $10K for Cooper Kupp, except we're paying $10.5K for, probably 15 plus targets, as many as 20 targets for these two guys. So it's a really interesting pairing this week and definitely allows you to just say, hey, I get these 2 spots right, and now I'll work with the other 7 spots and mix and match them from there. So with that, we will get out of here. We will see you on the DFS Lab again on Wednesday afternoon as we get you ready for the week 16 slate.